Sunday mornings, we love to have a chat about things happening around Sydney and around the state with people in the know. And this morning, I've got someone that's absolutely in the know, Tania Mihailuk from One Nation. Now, I wanted to speak to Tania today because we had a Fairfax, it wasn't a Fairfax, it was an opinion poll. It'll come to me in a moment, a week or two back. And the coalition hit the front federally, 51-49. It's happened a couple of times, but on this occasion, it happened on the back of an increase in support for One Nation, which is interesting. I mean, that's probably only where the conservative side of politics will get preferences. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get to Tania Mihailuk, who's on the line. Are you well?
How are you, Luke? I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, very well indeed, thank you. It's a shame you can't be here with me at Scenic Eclipse too. Yeah, because we're insisting that post every interview, the guest who's here has to jump in the jacuzzi and drink some French champagne. So,
and then
anyway,
go to the buffet, hey?
Yeah, then the buffet, exactly right. Now, let me ask you about a couple of things. I want to start with the story in the Sunday Telegraph about postcode wars and the added suffering. It's a terrible story about a mum who has to bury her boy. He wasn't in a gang. Just a teenage boy doing what teenage boys do, hanging out with mates, in a week where we've had other stabbings to process. I just wonder if we've left the gangs and the postcode wars too late. Have we been reluctant to intervene for, I don't know, cultural sensitivities? Have we not been tough enough? What's your take on this?
Well, look, last year the Parliament actually doubled its penalties for knife possession and wielding a knife, and there was, of course, some pushback from the usual bleeding hearts and your civil liberties and so forth. But I've got to say, I was looking at some of the data around that. Now, yes, police are definitely picking up knives. I think they picked up in total something in the order of 500 knives last year. 51 recently, just before Bondi. There was an operation where they were able to take 51 knives off the streets. The problem, I think, Luke, is actually what's happening in the courts, because we doubled the custodial sentences, but when I look at the data, when you look at the BOSCA data, it doesn't sort of correlate to any real increase in custodial sentences. So we're not actually making examples of young kids who are walking around with these knives. So we're picking them up, we're taking the knives off the street, but are we then actually making real examples? Because until we do, until magistrates and courts actually put some of these people away, you're not going to get knife crime down, because there's no actual punishment. I mean, 2.5, I think it's 2,200, and it's up to 4,400. Well, for some people, that might not be a deterrent, particularly if they don't even bother to pay the fine. But custodial sentencing matters, and you actually need to make examples of people, and I don't think they've done that enough. And that's why young people are walking around there with knives, and they don't seem to be too concerned. I mean, I'm a mother of 3 teenage kids. I do worry about my kids, particularly my sons, going out and socialising. I know my sons aren't carrying knives, but I'm worried about other young people that end up in a fight and out comes out a knife. And I'm sure there are other mums and dads out there just as worried as I am.
Oh, I'm sure you're right. I think that's a really good point, because I looked at those WASCAR numbers as well, and I think knife crime, it certainly hasn't been arrested, but it's turning the right way. But we've had a week, haven't we, in this beautiful city where things have just been so awful. And I guess that magnifies everyone's concerned about knife crime or crime of any sort. But, how do we get that? How do we sort that? I know, but how do we sort that out? How do we actually get, with tougher penalties, how do we get the judiciary to actually say, you know what, I might just go with the maximum here, or send a real message? Because, as you say, that doesn't appear to be happening.
Yeah, this is the type of review I hope the Premier actually undertakes. He has said this week that he'll look at the laws, and they'll look at having national sort of consistent laws around knife crime and knife possession. But what they need to do is actually, it's the Parliament that should take control of this, because if you leave it in the hands of the judiciary, nothing will change. You actually need to make examples of this, I think. I think you do need to make a public parliamentary inquiry, really looking into this. And I'm happy to move that way when Parliament resumes in May.
Yes.
And I hope the government supports me in that, because you actually need to have a really good look at what's actually happened since we doubled the penalties last year. Has that actually been taken up? I actually would put to you, Luke, that it hasn't been taken up. So despite the doubling of sentencing mid last year, I don't think that those custodial sentencing has actually been taken up by the judiciary. So it's really important that Parliament actually expose this, and that we actually make examples of cases where it should have resulted in a custodial sentencing, but it didn't.
Well, this is exactly the time to do what you propose. And I hope that government does get behind you here, because we've got, surely in Sydney now, we have an appetite to say, look, it's probably foolish to say that can never happen again. That can be our desire. It has to be our desire. But unless we look at this stuff now, it becomes part of that process, Tania, where things are always being looked into or reported on or investigated, but you never see the next step taken. So more strength to you. I hope you get that done. I want to talk about the Liberal Party here, because I think the New South Wales branch of the Liberal Party is, I don't want to be too harsh here, a joke. Taylor Martin was expelled this week from the Liberal Party as a result of investigations into text messages he sent a woman, the woman being a former federal MP, and some of the text messages are just vile. And Ben Ford, my colleague, revealed this story, I think, just under a year ago. So they have their state executive, and they've got these people gathered, and they know there's leaking going on, and old mate at the meeting says, right, show us your phone. What do you think of that? That's intriguing.
Yeah, look, I've got to say, somebody who spent 27 years in the Labor Party, I've saw a lot of leaks in my time. I spent time in the shadow ministry, and I've got to tell you, it's not unusual that you'll see politicians leaking out of these type of meetings. It's a shame, because the Liberal Party is polling pretty well at the moment in New South Wales, and if they got their act together, they might be actually in a position where they can be back in government. But at the moment, they're just focused on themselves, which is really a concern. I don't know if you can necessarily ask people to look at messages, though, Luke, because, this isn't communist China, and the reality is, well, it's not. People are...
No, look, it's a fair point.
When they come to these meetings, they're supposed to be people that are at the high echelons of the Liberal Party. They're there to make sure that the Liberal Party can actually get into government one day. And, they should be focused on cost of living issues. They should be focused on their policies, what's stopping the Liberal Party from getting into government, really focusing on those sorts of issues, not on what looks like factional politics to me. I think this is all factional politics, which is the problem the Liberal Party faces at the moment. And any time any party's in opposition for too long, Luke, they end up just focused on themselves and not on the people of New South Wales. And that's the problem the Liberal Party faces.
You're so right. You're so right, and probably naively, as a purist, I'm thinking, if you join a political party, you do it because you believe in certain values, certain policy ideals, or whatever. So you come together to try and get yourself into government. One way you don't do that is to leak on your mate because he's from a different faction. And I'm just probably a bit like you. I'm sick of politicians being about their own politics, and they look the other way when the really important stuff comes along. Now, before I let you go, I need you to tell me, is there a policy idea amongst One Nation New South Wales, perhaps, I'm not going to ask you to break anything here, but you'd like people to know about, because it's hard enough in opposition, but when you're not with the government and not on the crossbenches, it's even harder to get your message out there. Well, what's in One Nation's thinking for New South Wales, Tania?
Well, one of the issues that I'm going to be focused this year, and I did introduce it last year, is actually keeping politics out of the classroom, Luke. So I'm going to a bill shortly, in fact, either in May or June, where I'm going to ask this government to put tougher policies that in place and ensure there are repercussions for teachers that allow politics in the classroom. And we saw it after The Voice. The amount of kids that were, and parents who actually approached me and told me that their kids are made to feel guilty as a result of what happened with the referendum, and that's not fair. These teachers are paid to actually teach in the classroom, teach maths, English, etc., and not to actually play out with, not to be politicians. If they want to be politicians, they can run for Parliament and get out of the classroom. So I think that's an issue that One Nation will be focused on this year. And we're also focused on watching what's happening with the net zero stuff. And this, remember, the Liberal Party are working with the Greens and the Labor Party to put some really tough net zero targets in New South Wales. And we're really worried about the impact on business and on communities and indeed on families when it comes to high energy costs in relation to that. So they're two big issues for One Nation in the coming months.
Good on you. We'll talk again, Tania. Look after yourself. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Luke. Enjoy your day.
Take care. Yeah, you too. Bye-bye. Tania Mihailuk, who's with One Nation in New South Wales. Well, they're two important issues, aren't they?